Yes.
On the agreement standpoint, what are your views on confidentiality agreements and subcontractor agreements?
Confidentiality agreements, that's sort of spiked something in my mind that you didn't ask about, but confidentiality agreements I think are okay. Are you talking about with like independent contractors, employees, what?
So for me, I have both, and I worked with my attorney to get both of those. So anybody that was a subcontractor that did work for me, I had them sign those two agreements.
My feeling about it is that an agreement is probably only as good as someone's willingness to follow it. I know that kind of sounds crazy, but the thing that I thought about when you asked that was actually having a non-compete clause. Those things spike the same issues, and the issue is that if someone violates it, then you have to follow up with it. So my advice would be, if you're going to have those agreements, there needs to be a clause in those agreements that says what happens if it's violated. And it may not necessarily be something, because I think the positive points of you having those agreements are so that the expectations are laid out, which I think is really important, that everybody understands the expectations. The problem, like I said, is if somebody violates it, then you could end up in court. And intuitively, you think, well, what's the point of having that if I'm going to end up in court anyway? You could end up in court anyway without having those agreements. So you feel you're getting some sort of protection and not having an ability to not have to go to court by having those agreements. And I think the catch and the thing that people need to understand is that's not necessarily true. I think that the biggest, I think those agreements are fine, and I think they are good, like I said, for laying out the expectations. So if you are very specific about the expectations, that's great, because you know when they're being violated. There are two things that need to be clear in those agreements. What is a violation of the agreement needs to be very specific. There can't be arguments back and forth about what is or what isn't a violation of those agreements. And I think the other thing is that they need to be very clear about what is the consequence for not following through with those agreements. And depending upon your situation, it might be a different consequence. That's something you should speak to your attorney about. What are your options for consequences there?
I felt for me it was really helpful in having the dialogue around who owns what, because I was hiring designers to do logo design, and I was hiring a college student who wrote some things, and I wanted them to know that by virtue of my payment that I owned it and not them. And I think that was a really good conversation to have, because a lot of people don't really think that, and even employees don't think that. They're doing work for organizations and they think, well, this is my work, so therefore I own it, but in fact they don't own it. So that's why I felt it was really important to have those conversations. But it was really uncomfortable to have those conversations too, because the people that I hired were my friends, or people that I'd worked with. But so it's kind of like, even if you don't have the document, you still have to have the conversation, but the documents were an enabler for me that helped me get through something that I just really didn't want to do.
Yeah, and like I said, the expectations there are very clear, so they know, and those documents, having their signature on those documents could be very helpful if you do end up in a situation where but the whole point is to avoid those situations where you end up in court or any circumstance like that, and I think by having those documents, you're off to a good start with being able to avoid that.
Would you